Change is something CEOs are used to having to deal with, but are we seeing a different level of change? And if so, is it a matter of degree or of kind?
David, it is both degree and kind. We just published our volatility index. And if you look at the last 5 years, the level of disruption has increased 200% over the prior 5 years, where that index showed disruption of only 5%. And in all cases, these are areas that are new. So you have CEOs, including myself, who have not governed and led through the kind of inflation and geopolitical disruption that we're experiencing today. So very different environment than the past.
I also wonder if, with the change and maybe less growth than we've seen before, geopolitics, as you say, but also is it a bit more, less forgiving an environment, given the fact that interest rates now are on their way up rather than being near zero?
I think about this environment as both having challenges and opportunities, because certainly if you are a capital intensive business used to low cost of capital, it's certainly challenging. And at the same time, what we're seeing CEOs do is really focus on how to get the right competitive advantage, whether that's cost structure, looking at more organic instead of inorganic strategies, and using the opportunity to really reinvent how they do things, including in areas of the business that are more capital intensive, say capital projects, for example, and how to use technology better.
Oh, as far as you can tell, I'm sure it's a complicated answer. What are the causes of this difference in degree and in kind? Is it technological change? Is that driving it? Why is it that we're confronting more change than we have in the past?
What I'd say is that, of course, there's a huge geopolitical piece of this, and before that, it was a health piece with the pandemic. And I think the big shift that you're seeing post-pandemic is that technology itself used to be the disruptor. That is what we talk about. Today, the power of technology has become the certainty, what you can count on. It's an enabler. And we like to talk about all strategies lead to technology. And you're seeing that with the most advanced companies who have embraced that they need to reinvent all parts of the enterprise using technology, data, and AI, and most importantly, new ways of working to leverage those technologies in order to build greater resilience, to find new paths for growth.
So I'm really interested in the notion of having to change so many parts of the company at once. For example, with technology really permeating through the organization. I've certainly been in big companies where you need to focus on the finance, you need to focus on the legal, you need to focus on sales. But when you're changing everything at once, that's much more complex and much more fraught with peril, is it not?
Well, David, actually, we've been seeing this trend toward what we call compressed transformation. It immediately happened post-pandemic because early in the pandemic, leaders saw an opportunity to double down on what they were doing around digital transformation. And those who were behind and grappling with the new environment wanted to leapfrog. The shift now is seeing that compressed transformation not being reactive, but to be embraced as the strategy, rewriting the business textbooks about what it takes to actually succeed in the next decade. And that is what we do call this idea of being a total enterprise reinvention and being reinventor. And the point is that the greater risk is not embracing this as a new reality, as the new strategy, and thinking that you're in some kind of an environment where you can transform a lot and then you're done, because you need to think very differently about basic capabilities of your leadership team, how you build a culture of change. There are fundamental changes that happen when you say, I'm going to be a reinventor.
As you deal with so many large corporations all around the world, as you look at that fundamental change, does it extend to things like the metaverse, things like artificial intelligence, things that we hear about? I'm not sure I fully understand what they are, certainly don't understand the ramifications, but does it extend that far for the very large, successful corporation?
Well, I'd probably separate between the megatrends that are happening today, and we would call those three big ones being technology are the cloud, the move to the cloud, the use of AI, We all know that everyone's talking about that these days with ChatGPT and the metaverse. So those are three megatrends that are going to drive the success of companies if they embrace them. And in fact, the metaverse we think is being one of the big forces of change. And why is that? Is because it is so different in the way you work. I would say that it's important to understand those megatrends, and then separately, which we can talk about more about, is the need at the top in terms of technology knowledge of leaders. It's fundamentally different than the days of old where it was enough to have basic understanding and do a digital safari. And I'm talking to a lot of CEOs now about how to close that gap, including with the work that we do with them.
So, Julie, you have the advantage of both being the CEO of a very large, successful company and also dealing with these CEOs as well as CFOs, CTOs all the time. We at Wall Street Week address to some extent the role of the investor. How does the investor know? How do they discern which companies are up to this task that you're laying out and which ones are not?
There's a few things that we're seeing in terms of trends is companies really talking about what their strategy is and the role that technology plays in it. I also think that a lot of investors, certainly ours do, talk to our leaders, a lot, and being able to see, how proficient and how natural is it for leaders to talk about technology and how they're filling in gaps. So, for example, we're working with a lot of companies around what we do in managed services so that we digitize faster, we provide talent, and the leading CEOs are now talking about that work they do with us as part of their own talent strategy, as a way that they're closing the gap in their technology, whether it's the fact that they haven't digitized fast enough or the fact that they need to access talent more quickly. And so really thinking about how do you articulate your technology strategy, and more importantly, the way that you're changing the way you work. And I think that's a good way for investors to be asking those questions as they're talking to companies, and to be looking for those explanations when they hear companies lay out their strategy.